Here's another gem from the scriptures. I call this a type of Christ. Most of us realize and are aware that there are many persons and events in the Old Testament which are types or foreshadowings of the life, events, and meanings of the life and deeds of Christ. Numerous times in the New Testament, we're told that something was a type of things to come. So we can see many times events in the Old Testament depicting what will happen in the New. One such example or type of Christ is the event in Genesis chapter 22, where Yahweh tells Abraham to offer his son as a sacrifice to him. Let's read Genesis chapter 22, verses 1 through 13. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thy only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and saddled his and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went into the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they both of them went together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they came to the place which God had told him of. And Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thy only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering instead of his son. It's not hard to see that the offering up of Isaac, Abraham's only son, his unique miracle-born son, typifies Christ. God's only unique and miracle-born son would be offered up as a sin offering also. But there are some details here which are quite amazing. The Lord mentions for emphasis, Take thy only son. He tells Abraham to go to the land of Moriah, some 80 miles away, to a mountain which he will tell him. And they go to a special mountain. Now, let me point out that Abraham didn't hesitate. He rose up early in the morning. He didn't moan or groan or wring his hands that he had to kill his son. He goes to do it. Even Isaac, once he knows what's going to happen, complies willingly. Apparently he opened not his mouth, but was silent, just as a sheep is before the slaughter. Where have you heard that? And they go to a specific mountain in Moriah. Did you know that the temple was built on Mount Moriah? 2 Chronicles chapter 3 verse 1 tells us that Solomon built his temple on Mount Moriah. Is it the same mountain? Well, if the story of the sacrifice of Isaac is a type of Christ's sacrifice, it would make incredible sense that it's the very same place. And because the hill called Calvary was right next to the city, it was on the same mountain. How cool is that? And did you notice that Isaac carried the very wood that he was to be sacrificed on his back? It says, Abraham took the wood and laid it upon Isaac his son. Wow. Isaac carried up the mountain the very wood he was to die on, just like Jesus. How cool is that? And maybe the best gem is what Abraham said to his servants before he goes up the mountain. He says, I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again unto you. Abraham expects that Isaac will return with him back down the mountain. Do you know what that means? Well, the book of Hebrews tells us exactly what Abraham was thinking. In Hebrews 11, verses 17 to 19, we're told, by faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac. And he that received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that God was able to raise him up, even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. Wow! Here we have God expounding the meaning of what happened in Genesis chapter 22. Here we are told that Abraham was willing to go through with sacrificing his one-of-a-kind son because he believed God would raise him from the dead. Abraham believed in resurrection, and his faith reveals the final type of Christ in this passage, that Christ would be raised from the dead. And Hebrews goes on to say that Abraham received Isaac in a figure or type as raised from the dead. How cool is that? But one last gem. In verse 1, we're told that God spoke unto Abraham. This is obviously Yahweh, the Father. Then in verse 11, we're told that the angel of the Lord spoke to Abraham a second time and said, Thou hast not withheld thy son, thy only son, from me. So who spoke to Abraham, Yahweh or the angel of the Lord? The answer is yes. Here we see the two persons of the Trinity in the Old Testament speak to Abraham. And the angel of the Lord is none other than the pre-incarnate Jesus. So Jesus is here in the very scene, watching the event which would foreshadow his sacrifice for us all. And how cool is that?